Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sports Break. I am super excited to be joined today by Bethany Bradsher. She is a sports writer and author whose latest book is The Big Rock, about the $1 million prize Blue Marlin tournament in North Carolina. Thanks so much, Bethany, for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I'd love for you to tell just a little bit about, again, like who you are and, maybe a couple of your latest books. I know that you've released quite a few in the last few years, so tell people who you are.
Sure. So I have been a professional writer for 30 years almost. And most of that has been in sports. I've started off in newspaper as a newspaper, regular daily newspaper writer, sports writer, got to do some really cool things. It was a short period, but I was in the right place at the right time. So I got to cover the Carolina Panthers for their first two seasons, first draft, first game. For the training camp was in the city where I worked, so we were the paper of record for that. It was just amazing. It was a great experience. So I did that, and then I left full-time newspaper work and went into freelance in early 97, so a long time ago. And since then, I've done everything you can imagine. I mean, I've written for websites, a lot of still newspaper work back when that was still kind of thriving. Unfortunately, it's not anymore. A lot of website type work. I did magazine pieces. And then in 2010, I'd always wanted to write books, but just as my kids got older and I could sort of see clear to doing something a little longer, I decided to start writing books in 2009. And my first book came out in 2010. So in the past 10 years, I've actually had 10 books published and a couple more that are kind of sitting there waiting for various reasons, but they're written and working on some other things. So my books have been run the gamut. I've had a couple that are really about ACC basketball history. I've done a couple of biographies. I've ghostwritten some books. And then this latest book is about an offshore fishing tournament where the top fish weighs between 500 and 1,000 pounds. And one fish of that size brings that crew $1 million. So it's a wild event. And I guess the theme for me is interesting storytelling from the world of sports. And I'm always trying to find undertold or untold stories that, I like to find something that hasn't been done, but the storytelling is the thing. And it always has been through my whole career.
That's awesome. Well, and I know you're a Tar Heel. Did you write for the Daily Tar Heel by chance?
I did. I was a sports writer for the DTH actually back in the day. And so that kind of lit the fire a little bit for me. And it was funny because I never wanted to have that be my life. I was doing other things as a college kid. And so because of that, because I wasn't going to be there every day, I covered like gymnastics. I did some baseball. I covered some unusual sports. And I think that kind of got me started on the road to looking for those stories I like to cover the big sports, but it was also interesting to cover the ones that, maybe you had to dig a little deeper to tell the stories.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people often that if I could go back to college, I would attend so many of those sporting events that just don't get any of the recognition, like you said, and it's amazing what they're doing, like diving competitions.
It's really neat. And what I learned for a number of years, I mean, really about 15 years, I wrote for a publication and a website really out of East Carolina, which East Carolina University is 2 miles from my house. And I'm not doing that now, but I did it for so many years. And for most of those years, my emphasis was on the non-revenue or Olympic sports. And so I got to know those athletes, and I was always the only one that was covering them. And the coaches knew that, I was really close to the track and field coach and the swimming coach and the golf coaches. And they knew that if they had a good story, I was the one who was going to cover it. But the athletes were so, motivated and so smart and so sharp, so interesting. And there just weren't that many people that were sitting down to get to know them. So that was a treat to get to do that all those years as well.
Well, and awesome I'm sure they were thrilled that, someone's coming out and covering us, I think that's so cool.
It was a good time.
So take us back to when you're growing up. What sports are you playing? Are you playing sports? Are you just a big fan? What were sports like as a kid for you?
I kind of played a little bit of everything. I played a lot of softball, a good bit of soccer, but I was never good at it. I just played, I was a little soccer kid, but I was pretty serious about softball. Ironically, my high school didn't have it as a sport. And so when I got to high school, I wanted to do something for my school. And so that's when I stopped softball and started running track. So ran track, loved it. I still like to run. And so I was never like serious. I was never looking to be D1 at anything. I played volleyball too, which is funny because my daughters played volleyball and I got to coach, and my oldest daughter still coaches. So I've stayed connected with that sport, but I've always enjoyed the competition, enjoyed being part of everything. I think More than my own participation, though, was the fact that I grew up in Houston, and my whole family, we were all big pro sports fans. So it's not so much a college sports town because it's a big city, but we were all, and everything that happened with the Rockets, the Oilers, believe it or not, back in the day, and the Astros. We ate our dinner every night during baseball season on TV trays and watched the Astros play. When the Rockets made the finals, when I was in high school, I remember being with a bunch of friends because my friends had a party for the game, and I went home because I couldn't watch it with those people because they were just social, and my family was who I wanted to watch it with. And so it's just been a thing. Like when the Astros, won the World Series, make the playoffs, we're group texting now constantly, and it's been a connection with my family that I think that really made me love it more. And I knew I wanted to be a writer, but when it came time to kind of say, well, what kind of writer, that the world of sports just seemed like a natural fit, because it just had meant so much to me, in my family.
Yeah, I think that's so cool because I think, in other conversations I've had, I talk about how sports can be in the fabric of the community at large, but so much so too in the family. I love that you were saying like I had to leave that party because it was
Like, what's
not.
wrong with you people?
Yeah. I sometimes get the same way. I'm like, I am here to watch the game. Like we can chat when there's a call or something, but like it's just funny how people are so different.
Yeah, it was an excuse for a party, and I was like, okay, I'm done with you. But it for me. I lost my mom in 1993, and I think with that's a huge loss. And I, with my sister, my brother, my dad, I think sports has been something that's kept us together in a way that's been really special. And I mean, I'm in Minneapolis right now, and it's funny because the Twins are playing the Astros in the playoffs, and I landed and saw these weird twins like thing, like a cardboard cutout in the airport. I took a picture of it and sent it to my family group chat and said, send help, And so they're like, can you do voodoo? Where can you go to? And the Astros won last night. So I guess I did a good job.
It worked. Yeah.
But it is, it's that kind of thing where it's always a connection that we have. And that's really significant. And that's, keeps me kind of in it.
Yeah, I love that. Do you feel like it's also trickled down to like your immediate family, like with your kids? And I mean, I love that, you do have some kids that were coaching or played so much sports. Do you think that they're coaches because you were a coach once, or what do you think that's translated to?
Somewhat. I think the sports thing is funny with my own children because I have four, and one of the four is like, he's encyclopedic. He knows everything about everything. He probably will go into some kind of sports career in the production or broadcasting side. We don't know. He's only 19, but the other three kind of come in and out depending on the sport and what's happening. They have certain things they're really interested in. But every March we do family March Madness brackets, and it is hot. It doesn't matter if you care about the teams, you care about the brackets. And we actually have a fantasy football league now that everyone's in, and nobody other than, well, my husband and my oldest son and I had done one before, but nobody else had ever done it. So I'm texting him going, you got to take that guy off your roster. He's hurt. And whatever. I'm trying to give them tips and get them involved. So it is, I just think it's a really sweet thing that can bring family together. So, but it's funny. I mean, they know the teams that we're passionate about. And I went to North Carolina. My husband's a Duke fan.
Oh, wow.
And so, growing up, when they were growing up and Duke Carolina would play, it was always like, which side of the room are you going to sit on? And I would always remind them who made the meals and, so fortunately, I don't think I've raised any Duke fans. So I feel really good about that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's success. So.
Stellar record. Yeah.
I wrote a Wake Forest book too. Did you know that?
I think I have. I mean, I remember that.
Two Wake Forest books, but I wrote the biography of Bones McKinney, who was the basketball coach who brought Wake to their only Final Four in the mid-'60s. And he was a colorful, hilarious character. So that was really fun. And then the book about the Dixie Classic basketball tournament has a lot of Wake stories in it as well. So I've spent quite a bit of time over there.
Yeah, well, definitely everyone should check the show notes. We will put all the links to all of those for sure. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's so interesting too. And again, that loyalty that sports bring up is so strong in people. Like my sister's the same. She's married to a Duke fan. She was, born and bred a Tar Heel. So it's always funny. And like just the fun that comes with it. Yeah. Obviously, like after one team loses, it's okay. I need an hour to process. Don't talk. Don't rub it in my face.
I remember those moments with either one of us that we just were like, went to bed. Like I can't. So yeah, there's been some painful moments, but it makes for a lot of fun.
Yeah.
in the
And
big.
I'm with you too. Like we all started doing a fantasy football family thing, which we've stopped now as of late. My uncle was like really big into it and he passed away a couple years ago and we've kind of
Mhm.
I think hit pause. But once we all dispersed and went across the country, it's like all of our cousins. But yeah, like the text messages of just the trash talk or all the stuff that's just so much fun. It's a way to communicate weekly that we didn't have before.
That's right. That's right. My sister is in our fantasy football league. She lives in near Galveston, Texas, and so now she's playing against her nephew or her niece, and they're connecting with each other in a way they wouldn't otherwise. And I just love that. I think that's really fun. Just those different connections that are made.
Yeah. Well, and so I'm curious to think how, so as a writer, I mean, I know that it's not just like sitting down and writing stuff. I know it's like actually a very difficult profession. Could you tell a little bit about that? And maybe if playing sports as a kid, you learned anything about discipline or,
Mhm.
work ethic that's helped you in that career?
Yeah, I think it is, well, for me, there's so many different aspects to the writing I've done. Newspaper has a certain set of skills and challenges, and being a freelance writer is a different because you have to be very self-motivated now. I don't work for one boss. I work for, at the same time, maybe five or six. And sometimes I'm just working for myself. Sometimes I write books for other people and sometimes I don't. So it all varies. But a lot of it is being very organized. I think through just being involved with a lot of things as a kid that helped me with time management. I've always kind of had a big capacity to have a lot of things plates spinning, sometimes probably to a fault. But I think that, yeah, whatever it was, sports, yearbook, the different things I did as a kid, and it was just staying super involved with things, ministry, and I was able to learn how to do that. But I think one of the things I tell people about writing books is that you always hear about writer's block and being, whether people are inspired. And I just don't, that's not a factor for me. I don't get to wait until I feel like writing. And, the first book I wrote, my youngest son was in kindergarten and it was half day kindergarten. So he was out every day at 11:45. And so I set myself deadlines. I still do it this way, where I said, okay, 3 days a week, I have to write 1,500 words a day. It was something like that. And those, I had to do it by 11:30 because then I went to pick him up. So there was no time to go, well, today I don't feel like writing, and I said, it's literally like making widgets. Like you go to the factory and you make your quota. And that is, I think, really helpful for me because my life has been busy and I've had four children and a lot going on. And if I don't set these, solid deadlines of you got to write this many words a day, I would never have gotten books written. And then I kind of set the template for how I would do that going forward. Now, I don't know. I'm not a fiction writer. It's probably harder, I guess, if you're making up the story. For me, the key is doing good interviews, having good material in front of me when I sit down to write the 1,500 words. If I've done that work, then it's pretty easy. But you have to have done the work ahead of time to get there. But it was so funny. I would pick my older kids up from school and they would go, how many words did you write today? Because everybody knew, what my deadline was that day and that I had to check the box. And if I got behind, I had to make up on the weekend, just kind of pretty regimented about it, which I think makes it work.
Yeah. Well, and what's like an estimate? And I'm sure it depends on the length of a book too, but like what is like a typical timeline of start to finish, like a book? Not so much like being published, but like you're ready to turn it in.
Yeah, well, I'm laughing because the last book I wrote, I don't tell a lot of people this, so now we're on a podcast, but it's fine. It's a really good book. I like it a lot, but I wrote it in 6 weeks. That is not typical. It was insane. I had no life, and there were a whole lot of reasons why that happened, but it happened. So here we are. My writing process is usually probably more in the 5 to 6 month range. I have had books take longer. It depends on how much research and whether I have a hard launch I'm looking toward, like an event. And that was why we had to push the accelerator on the Big Rock book because it needed to come out for the Big Rock this year. And some things that were going on last year delayed. Anyway, I just got myself in a position where I had to just churn it out. One of the things I do is my daughters both help me with transcription because that can take a long time because you're doing all these interviews and you get them transcribed. And I don't trust like services to do it. And they kind of know now how to do it for me. So I've hired them. So when I was doing that book, I had to have them help me. And I had 2 books I wrote last year that they were helping me with that with as well. So you kind of just figure it out. But yeah, I would prefer, and if somebody contacts me and wants me to ghostwrite a book or write a book for them, like a contract book, I usually try to slate out, 4 or 5 months of writing time. with the research kind of embedded in that as
Mm.
well. So that works fine. That
Yeah.
is going to feel relaxed to me after what I just did in January and February. It was
Yeah.
right before the pandemic, and I had my house pretty much to myself. We have one child left at home, but he was in full-time high school. And I was so glad it was before everybody came home, because I would have been probably not very nice to live with if I'd been trying to get that much work done and everybody was there,
Right.
but it was because my office is my house, and I would have been like, okay, and you couldn't go anywhere to work, everything
Right.
was closed. So anyway, the timing worked out well.
No, that's awesome though. I mean, I think the the ability to even do that, yeah, that's unreal. 6 weeks feels like nothing, you know?
There were no Saturdays, there were no Sundays, there were only
Gotcha.
days
So
of
just
yeah.
full on. Yeah.
There was no life. I'm not sure what everybody ate, the people that were there.
But,
It was,
probably every author needs that experience of like the one that was just insane,
yeah, it's good to know you can do it, because now I think my standards are, oh yeah, I can get that done if I need to, if it's worth it. And that was a book like I said, I've had some books that were self-generated. I wanted to write it, and that was one of those. There are 4 of my books that have been that kind of book, and the others have been somebody else has paid me kind of upfront or ghostwritten to do. So it's good to have a balance of those 2 types. But this one was all my energy, and that helped.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Very cool. Well, are there any like stories that you've come across that were just like, oh, it kind of just makes you like fall in love again with sports?
I'd say so many. I mean, I think I'm always looking for stories of people who have, been pioneers, which I know you're interested in as well. The book I wrote about the Dixie Classic basketball tournament, a big theme of that was the integration of college basketball. So
Mhm.
Oscar Robertson, who was the best basketball player in the country in the late 50s, he was at Cincinnati and then went to the NBA, and he came to Raleigh to play in this tournament. And at the time, none of the ACC schools were integrated yet. So his coming was a big deal. The players from Cincinnati and Michigan State, who both had Black players, couldn't stay in the hotel, so they had to find alternative housing. So I got to interview the guys who gave up their frat house and converted it to a place for these 2 teams to stay. It was just a wild story, and to be on the ground floor and talking to all the people that were involved with that. Kind of for me now, I'm looking for more of those stories. I actually read a book this summer about a guy named Henry Harris, who was the first Black basketball player at Auburn in the 60s. And the author had done a lot of research about all the other trailblazers in the SEC, both in football and basketball. So embedded in that book is all those other stories as well. And it's so, heroic, but so tragic. And you just cannot believe what they went through. You
Mhm.
cannot. And it wasn't that long ago. I mean, the first Black basketball player at my alma mater was the year I was born. And that just is not recent. I mean, that's recent history. It's not distant past. And so
Right.
I'm always so struck by that. And with the Henry Harris book, and his story is tragic. But you read it, and the things that were yelled at them from the court, and the things that they tolerated. And so you just think, God, that is heroic. And they wanted to quit because it was terrible at times, but they were representing their entire community, race, family. They had this pressure that they were carrying. So I think there's so much when you have stories like that have heart and courage, and they really go way beyond what's going on the court or the field. I'm always looking for those kinds of things. So that's always a challenge, is to figure out what story needs to be told, who's out there. Everybody's life could probably make a good book, but what's something that's really significant, and it's going to change the way people view, something in sports or beyond. So.
Yeah, I think it is a unique pairing, sports and social justice. I feel
Mhm.
like there's no other profession that's also a hobby for so many people. I
Yeah.
don't know. I just feel like it's
Yeah.
something unique. Like the voice of movies can be attributed to like, oh, the liberal Hollywood. But there's
Right.
something about sports
Yeah.
that does affect anyone that's paying attention. I just find it so interesting, but I'm so grateful for it. And like this year with the WNBA and just
Yeah.
all the thankfully the noise that they're making
Hmm.
for voting or Breonna Taylor or whatever. But I just find it like there's such a deep history there, which is awesome. But I'm curious as to, I guess it's just because it's people being real and like, it's never really been, I'm just here to play a game.
Yeah.
This is my life.
Yeah, that's right. It's really significant. And I think when I write books and then I interact with people after the fact, I see what you're talking about just in what sports means and how it breaks through the fabric of just goes way beyond the box scores or the playoff brackets or whatever. Um, this isn't a social justice story, but it just occurred to me, and this isn't a great example though. I wrote this book I said about the Dixie Classic, which was a college basketball tournament in the 50s. It was 1949 to 1960. It was canceled because of a point shaving scandal. So it's a fascinating story. But what happened, it was played between Christmas and New Year's in Raleigh, and there was no TV coverage yet. So the only way to be there was to be in the building. And all these fathers and sons would go together because the boys would get tickets in their Christmas stocking because it was right after Christmas. So I heard that over and over and over, that was a thing, that they would go after Christmas, as their gift. Well, I was at a book signing in a Barnes & Noble in Burlington, North Carolina, and I was sitting with my books at the table, and this older gentleman in his 70s probably came up to my table, and he looked at the cover, which is Reynolds Coliseum with all the smoke, and it just brings him back, those that went. And he said, "Are you the author?" And I said, "Yes." And he just started to cry, and he couldn't speak. And I kind of got his name out of him and signed the book, and he went and paid. And I was like, oh, like well, how did I let that go? Because I so wanted to know. Well, thankfully, within the next year, he found me and asked me to come speak like at his Rotary Club. And so he was able to say, "I don't know if you remember me," but and he started to tell me, I was like, "Of course I remember you." Like, it's one of these things that I just could not have forgotten. And so he was able to explain a lot more that was what it was. He went every year with his father, and it was something that they did together that was so significant. And when he saw that cover in that picture, it brought all of it back to the point that he couldn't speak. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll keep doing this as long as that kind of thing can happen. And it can evoke, whether it's a memory or a stand that someone needs to take, or it's going to awaken, because sports can be, tangential to so many other important things in life. And for him, it was his relationship with his dad. So that's just a fun, thing to get to be part of. It's really special.
Yeah. And again, just that, I feel like the whole theme of this has been, just how family can be so in tune with each other. And, it's not it's just enjoying time together, which is so awesome, especially nowadays, that hopefully we could just be in a room together, or one day back in a stadium together.
That's right. That'll be fun. That'll be fun when that can happen. But those are good stories. It's really amazing. And then we had a baseball coach in Greenville, North Carolina, where I live, who, my first book was about Keith LeClaire, who was the East Carolina baseball coach who died of ALS in 2006. And he just inspired a whole community. So it's like beyond just the family, his illness and his battle with it. And he was incredibly successful as a coach, and then had to stop coaching because of the ALS. But everybody had followed it, and he was sick for 4 years, and it was really difficult on our community. It was so nice that my first book was something that was that important to the place I lived. And when the book came out in 2010, I would have these grown men coming up to my table. We launched it at a baseball tournament named after him in March. And people, again, were in tears. And there were these big burly guys who, had followed Keith's story and had been heartbroken by his loss. And then they read the book and it brought it back. But I had guys want to give me a hug, but again, it was just that significance of getting to be part of, reminding people of something that, even though it was sad, it was definitely a sad book, but it meant so much to so many people. And they wanted that. They wanted to be able to hold it in their hands and remember that. And so, sometimes it all just hits right. And you're like, that was the book to write. So I'm always looking for more of those.
That's awesome. That really is awesome. And just a tribute to so many things. So that's incredible. Yeah. Well, thank you again for being here and joining. And where can people find you? Again, we'll put links in the show notes, but where can people find you online or your books?
I have a website. It's not super up to date, and my daughter's going to try to help me get that straight soon, but it's BethanyBradsher.com. But all my books are on Amazon. So you can go to Amazon, just type in my name, and they'll all pop up. The latest book about the fishing tournament, there's a website called BigRockBook.com. So there's all kinds of information there, and you can order there as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.